Hey everyone, just wanted to start out this episode by letting you know that there were some audio issues at the end of this recording. Unfortunately, Bill's audio did cut out after around 50 minutes, so we do apologize for that. We do hope that you still enjoy the rest of this episode. It was such a fun collaboration that we had with them, and we do apologize for this, but regardless of that, it's still a great episode. And we hope that you enjoy it. And welcome back to 90s Noise. This is Ashley, born 1988.
I'm April, born 1991. Right, we are here with another episode of 90s Noise, and we've got some guests today. Let's go ahead and have you guys introduce yourselves.
Bill Bant with the All 80s Movies Podcast.
And I'm Jason Masick with the All 80s Movies Podcast.
And today we're going to be talking about a 80s classic movie, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure from 1989. But before we get started, Jason, Bill, give us a little rundown on your guys' podcast. You guys discuss mostly just plain 80s movies, which is great. We love the 80s also. But go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having us. Again, we are Jason and Bill, or Bill and Jason, from the All 80s Movies Podcast. And yes, we do plain 80s, as April put it. It is it. That's as simple as it gets. I can tell you that we, cover all the films from what we perceive as the freshest decades in cinema, and that's the 1980s. We go one movie per week. We cover everything from the blockbusters to the flops to everything in between. We like to think of ourselves as a little bit more niche, or we have our little niche, if you will, because we don't, like I said, just cover the blockbusters. We do the cult classics as well. We try to find the smaller films in the 80s that people have nostalgic attachments to, and that's really what our podcast is about, as you are about here at 90s Noise, and that's what you're making noise about. I mean, it's really about the great memories and the history that we have in common with these great times. And when we cover these 80s films, it's really about, who we were with, where we were, and just the feelings and the thoughts we had, not just of that time when we saw the film, but then, of course, what our perspective is now on all of it as adults. And it's really about having fun. And we hope to inspire our listeners to go back and revisit these movies, especially if they have never seen them before, and share their thoughts and share these films with friends and loved ones and everyone, and then we can all kind of engage in a fun discussion about a great decade. So I don't know, what did I leave out, Bill?
You can find us on All 80s Movies Podcast.com, Twitter, Podcast All 80s. We're on Facebook and TikTok at All 80s Movies Podcast. And you can find us any streaming platform. We're all on all the major ones.
Perfect.
Awesome.
I'm throwing some 80s here. 80s here.
Yeah.
I got my camera.
Oh, there you go.
Even though that's not what we're talking about or anything, but I thought I'd throw that in there.
Still, I am an 80s baby, so I love
Awesome.
all things from the 80s. I kind of became obsessed with the 80s later in life. I didn't watch this movie growing up, but sort of became fascinated with it later on. And obviously with Keanu in it, it kind of made me want to watch it even more. So that's kind of my connection with this movie for sure.
Yeah, I didn't get the chance to grow up in the 80s at all. I was 1991, but I have two older brothers who were both mid to late 80s. And so a lot of my childhood was 80s based because of them. And I do remember them watching this, and if I remember correctly, I was shooed out of the room because it was, hey, this isn't appropriate for you. But then rewatching it in preparation kind of brought back some of those memories, and of course, love Keanu and just fun aspect of this movie and the history too. Like I enjoyed the history a lot, so that was fun to get to watch their portrayals and everything. So I got a question for you guys. What did you guys watch this during when it came out originally? Was it one that you guys went and saw in theaters?
Yep, 100%. I have a very, very specific story, a very specific attachment to this particular film. I'm so happy that you chose it because this was my first date. This was my first date in high school. That's right. I was 15 years old. I was a sophomore at Antioch High School in Illinois. And I went on my first date with Nikki Chorus. She was a little bit older. I do prefer the older ladies. I always have. That's not true. I'm just saying that for dramatic effect. Anywho, she was 16. She was the manager of the tennis team, and I was a tennis player. And boy, she was cute with the curly brown hair and just super, super kind. Really, really nice. And she drove. She had to drive. I did not have my driver's license. So at first, there was a feeling of emasculation, I guess, because she had to drive. But, I was like, still felt like I was cool. I was dating an older girl in high school. And I was excited. So our first date was to go to, if I'm not mistaken, I hope, Nikki, if you're out there, please correct me some way, somehow. But I believe we most likely went to the Lakehurst Cinemas at the Lakehurst Mall, which was a local mall in our near my small town that I grew up in Lindenhurst, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago. And we went to see this movie. And so this was released in February of 1989, a great year for movies, by the way. And we probably saw it a little bit after that month of February, but it was still in theaters, obviously, and had a great time at the theater. And then she drove me home, and I never will forget sitting in my driveway in Lindenhurst, Illinois, so nervous at the end of that date because I was like, thank you for a good time. Thank you for, it was a great movie. Thank you for driving. I guess I'll see you soon. And I was opening the door to get out, and she just looked at me and said, aren't you going to kiss me? And I said, do you want me to? And she said, I wouldn't have asked you if I didn't want you to. And so it was not only my first date, it was my first kiss. And that's my serious and amazing and romantic connection to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Turned out to be an excellent adventure for myself. Yes.
Seriously.
So thanks for bearing with me through that long-winded story. But yes, I have a very real attachment to seeing this movie in the theater for the first time.
Mm-hmm. You expect me to top that story, Jason? That's awesome. Wow. I'm in some trouble right now.
Thanks for coming, Bill.
Later. Well, this is funny for me because when you gave us a couple of movies to pick, and this was on the list, I was in high school also when this movie came out, and I remember so many friends in high school telling me how much they loved this movie. But I didn't see it in the theater. I eventually rented it, and I watched it, and I just didn't get it. It just didn't do it for me. I actually preferred at the time the sequel, The Bogus Journey. So I have not seen this movie since I saw it that first time when I rented it. So when I was like, oh man, I'm going to come on this movie and say how much I don't like it. But I actually watched it again last night with my daughter who's 11. And I have to admit, the whole movie put a huge smile on my face. I was like, okay, now I get it. I totally did not understand this when I was a kid. But the funny thing is, too, like 5 minutes into the movie, my daughter goes, are they going to talk like this the whole time? With the dudes and the excellent and the bogus. And I was like, yes, this is how it goes. She's like, oh, I don't know if I can handle this. I'm like, well, let's just see how it goes. But she enjoyed it also. But I think that's what it was, too. It was such a different, for me, how I was as a teenager compared to what Bill and Ted was. It was too much. It was too much of an exaggeration. I was like, I'm not that understanding what they were going through. I was more of top of the class. I didn't talk like that. So it was, in a way, it was almost kind of irritating to me. And Jason knows, too, when we talk about movies with characters that are like that, I tend not to identify with them that much. So I don't understand their journey as much. But for some reason this time, I was like, oh, man, yeah, I totally been missing out. I did not get it back then, but now I was like, oh, good. I'm glad we were forced to rewatch this, because I know Jason has asked me a ton of times to do this movie for our podcast. So I'm just kind of like, no, that's okay. I'll just deflect it for now. But I'm glad. And like I said, it is all about perspective, and when you watch it and when you see it. And this is a prime example of it. And there is a bunch of movies I can list. The first time, I did not like it at all. And the second time I watched it, I'm like, oh, okay. Now I get it. And this is now, I can now put this one on the list.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
That's great. I wanted to jump in real quick and just say, just to piggyback off what Bill was saying, because we talk about the then and the now, right? That's a big part of why we do this podcast, or our podcasts. And I was afraid rewatching it today because now my opinion is biased, of course, because of the nostalgic attachment and, as I mentioned, a romantic attachment. So I'm watching it today going, oh my gosh, I'm worried that this won't hold up. There's this inherent fear that comes along with it. Like, I almost want to revisit it because I don't want it to tarnish my warm memories, these things that I hold dear, and that it just would come off supremely dated. But that's part of the fun, I think. And just revisiting it again was an absolute blast. And I don't, spoiler alert, I still love it. So I know we'll get into the details, but again, just thanks for choosing this movie, guys. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I definitely do understand, Bill, where you're coming from on that, because I think when I'd seen some of the clips growing up, I was kind of the same way. I was like, okay, I just don't understand this. This is a little too exaggerated for me. Then rewatching it this last week to prepare, I was like, the over-exaggeration is kind of fun. It adds like a different flair to it that as an adult you kind of look back and you're like, okay, I like that. It gives you more of a, I don't know, it just kind of puts another spin on it, to me personally, because I am one, Ashley knows this, my childhood growing up is very much more of a boy childhood, I guess, because of my older brothers. And so like the different movies I watched were much more of the ones related to guys and boys because I had to go along with my brothers. And so I got some of that early on. And even then I was kind of like, this over exaggeration is a little too much for me. But now rewatching some of those different things such as this, it's one of those you just laugh at, you enjoy. And it kind of makes you feel all fuzzy and fun inside. So
could have said it better. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm the oldest of three, so if my brother and sister wanted to watch TV, it was whatever I'm watching. And my brother will still say today some of the things that he's influences, because it's like, you forced me to watch this stuff over and over again, and I'm still stuck being a fan of it. So I totally get it with that. And having two older brothers, that must have been tough. It's probably a lot of sports and movies that nothing in your wheelhouse at the time.
Really not. Like, I definitely have a lot more of a connection to more of the boy geared 90s things than the female geared stuff. Like, I didn't do a lot of Barbies and different things like that because it wasn't cool to my brothers, so I didn't want to mess with it because I wanted them to approve of what I did and everything. And so there was wrestling and sports and all that fun jazz.
Oh, that's amazing. It's a great story.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I mean, we talk about perspective, and this movie comes out in 1989. Bill and I were in high school, and now I had a younger sister, but I just was already a huge fan of film, and I already probably had an inkling of where I wanted to go. I mean, there were so many things that I wanted to be when I was growing up, and I was like, well, how can I be all those things? Well, I could be an actor, And then I was falling in love with films. I was falling in love with orchestral soundtracks. I bought the soundtrack to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. You know, the music, which you barely hear, is composed by the great David Newman, but there's a great track listing by some great, kind of, I don't know how you would categorize them, but names or band names you might not recognize, but that it's great music. And so I was a collector of those soundtracks, but I was already, looking ahead to, what's life like in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, in California? And this film comes out, and I think Bill and April, we've been alluding to the fact that a concern before watching the movie is, are these characters simply caricatures? Is it too much of an exaggeration? And what I would tell people, if you haven't seen the film, and those that are fans will already understand, that the movie really has heart. So it's about the heart. It's the good intentions. It's the good message. And it's almost really wholesome in that way. But again, it comes down to entertainment, and does it succeed in entertaining? But yeah, it's nice that we're doing this with you guys too, because there's some crossover here. Obviously, Bill and I are, a decade and a half older than you. We go back a little ways, but the 90s were extremely influential. And I understand you both are in Central Florida. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So Bill and I, guess where we were from 91 to 95 or thereabouts?
Down here?
Oh.
We were attending the University of Miami, the U. That's where we went to film school. So we share a little bit
awesome.
of Florida there in common, especially in the early 90s.
Yeah, that's how we met. I was doing my first film for school, and I needed an actor, and I had a friend that said, I have a suite mate, and he's in the acting program. Maybe you can use him. And yeah, that's how Jason met, and Jason was in my first student film all those many years ago. Oh, God, it might be the 30th anniversary of that movie, now that I think about it.
We should do a separate podcast just on that film, for the anniversary.
We could do a special re-release, I guess.
Absolutely.
Great.
It's like, where can we find that? Because we're all about that, for sure.
Oh, this is so sad. I think I still have it on like VHS, and that's it. That might be the only couple I have. I have to transfer it to digital.
Yeah, we should turn it over to these two, because that does qualify as a 90s film, right? Technically.
That's true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you guys are now both in California. Are you guys still doing in the movie industry? Doing things in LA or films or acting or anything of that sort?
Yeah, Jason and I are part of a small production company called Waterwell Pictures, and we've done a bunch of short films, but really things shut down during the pandemic, so it was impossible to get anything started up again, and we just wanted to do creative. Jason and I and our other partner, Marwan Abderazak, we would meet weekly. And the first maybe hour and a half, we would talk about our upcoming projects. And then the next 2 hours, we would talk about all the movies that we had watched throughout the week. And that's when I went to Jason. I'm like, hey, do you feel like doing a podcast? Because basically it's just what we're doing anyway. When we're sitting over dinner anyway, just talking about movies. And I wanted to go niche and do 80s. And luckily Jason was on board. And yeah, we're now into season 3 on this. So I mean, hopefully we're going to get back into the production stage. Our other partner, Marwan, he's been doing stuff while we've been doing the podcast. So we're really just trying to look for that one project again to get us all back on board and start up.
Incredible. That was something growing up I always was interested in. I grew up in the Midwest in Kansas. And so It was one of those things where I did go to school for like 2 semesters to do film, but at that time I was also doing tour managing for a band, so I missed a lot of school for that, and film was always a big thing. And that's why, like, Ashley and I, when we started to talk about doing our podcast, I was like, okay, but you do understand we're gonna have a lot of episodes like involving movies, right? Because that is a big aspect of my childhood and something that I'm very passionate about myself. It's always nice to talk to people who were able to make it into that industry also.
Yeah, I was going to ask you both a little bit about your history. What were you going to say, Bill?
No, just that you eventually have an independent movie that's coming out sometime. We have no idea, but you did shoot something recently, and there's still, I guess, in post-production.
So, right, we've been kind of in a hiatus as far as Waterwheel Pictures goes, but we still have some planned projects. And Bill is a very talented writer. I've gotten into some writing myself, screenwriting, that is, and I took a break from the acting for a bit, just trying to come up with our own projects and make our own content, and for me to act in as well. But I got lucky. I caught a little break mid last year where there's a school in San Diego. It's called John Paul the Great Christian University, if I hope I'm saying that right. And they are excellent. It's a smaller film school. Well, they do other things, and they obviously have other courses, but one of their main focuses is film. And now every year they fund their own feature film project. And this was the inaugural project this past year, 2022. And they did a film called Oh Brawling Love. That's Oh Brawling Love. Doesn't roll off the tongue necessarily, but it's a unique title at least. And I landed a supporting role in it because of a friend of a friend. And it was just a really, really fun project to work on, an excellent crew. But one of the most professional sets I've ever been on, and it was 99% students. And the director, Maggie, she was a graduate. And anyway, it was a great project. So I was fortunate. That just really reinvigorated me to get back into the acting game, if you will. So that's where I'm at. But when you talk about, how Bill mentioned how our podcast kind of came about, I wanted to know a little bit more about how yours came together, because I think I heard that you both, Ashley, maybe you could answer this. Did you met at a concert in 2018? So that's only, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, I think it was it 2019?
2019, yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So 4 years.
Yeah, we met at a concert. Yeah.
And so what was the conversation? What happened then what was the impetus where you just both were like, are we best friends? And should we let's do a podcast? Like, it seems like, how did that all come about?
I think so. I mean, I think just we had a big similarity in our upbringing with like Disney and stuff, and we just started spouting off random things, and we're like, wait, you know that? And and then we just became, that night at the concert, we're like exchanging numbers and everything, and it's just sort of blossomed from there as far as, all right, let's go to Disney together. Let's go out and do this, and let's go to this concert. And then it kind of fizzled out because then you moved away, April, so you weren't nearby, but we still stayed connected. And I don't know. And then we just kept kind of coming back to all these connections that we had growing up, that we were like, well, why don't we just put this into a podcast and let's just keep having these conversations and let's relive our childhood again. So
That's fantastic. I love it because your relationship is still kind of young compared to Bill and I that have been friends for almost going on 30 years, and that you found a connection and now you're putting a real voice to it and putting it out there is pretty cool. And we were doing a different podcast last weekend where we were talking about the relationships that the podcasting creates. I know I've become closer to Bill. I might be just speaking for myself here. I don't know how Bill feels, but I feel like we've gotten closer doing this pod, and I hope you guys continue to build on the friendship through this kind of cathartic process in a way, of just talking about your history in the 90s and building your connection together.
All right, I have to ask on this one. Going back to the movie, Bill and Ted. I know we do this all the time. We kind of get into other topics and everything, but bringing it back to Bill and Ted. Now, watching the movie, which character do you guys gravitate towards more? Is it Bill? Is it Ted? Or is it one of the other characters?
That's a good question. Well, I think just because Keanu Reeves became so big after the movie, and we constantly have seen Keanu Reeves evolution as an actor. I mean, now he's one of the biggest names, one of the most popular names. You hear so many great stories about just what a great human being he is. I think it's always fun to go back and see where they started. And so I think just watching him in such an early role, not necessarily identified him, but I was just more curious watching him to see. It's like, wow, here's a guy who's Ted, and now John Wick. This is one of the biggest action film franchises of all time, and God knows how many movies
Right.
that's going to run. To see that and just... I always joke, like, if I go see a Keanu Reeves movie in the theater, it's the one that bombs. I always seem to see the wrong ones. Like, I saw Johnny Mnemonic in the theater, but I missed Speed. So I always just wait for everything just to come on video, because I feel like if I go see his movie in the theater, it's going to jinx it. Yeah, I think just watching Keanu in his early roles, I think, was kind of fascinating going back and watch this.
Yeah, it's a great question, by the way, because obviously, as we're talking about, I was in high school when this came out. So, I mean, this is a completely relatable film when the two stars, the two protagonists, are in high school and they're pursuing their passion, right? They're trying to become musicians. They want to be the Wild Stallions, which, by the way, I love the fact that they put the Y in wild and the Y in stallions. And every time I look at stallions, I just see stall lins. But that's how I was in high school as well, where I knew I had this budding passion for the arts, mainly acting and film and theater, because in high school I was in theater as well and in band. And I had these extracurricular activities that I was busy with that could very well be distractions from my studies. There were very specific times when my studies suffered because of the extracurriculars, specifically an English class, an excellent English class I was in, talking about film and talking about archetypes in film. And I remember the professor saying, "Hey, Jason, you turned in this project and I had high hopes for you, but you've been dropping off as of late." And it was because of my extracurriculars. But that's a little bit besides the point. The character I relate to, I think, between the two would have to be Bill. It's interesting rewatching this movie today to see that there is a subtle difference between the two. I thought, initially that I was like, okay, are these just caricatures of people because of the that kind of valley accent or affectation and the usage of dude and excellent and triumphant and awesome and all those words. And but there is a subtle difference I found, which was really cool. It was a cool discovery that it seems as Bill is slightly more grounded and just slightly more practical about, we got to do this. We got to study. We got to pass this history exam. Or he tends to drive the ship a little bit more, keep Ted on track a little bit more. And I think I relate to that a little bit more because I had a lot more focus in high school, even though I would get distracted. So, yeah, because I had friends also just like Ted that just were kind of out there. They were floating around and had a lot of talent and were gifted in different ways, but school just wasn't their thing. But I loved hanging out with them because they were just so fun-loving it out all the time and didn't seem to have a care in the world. So I think I relate to Bill a little bit more.
Ashley, what about you?
I don't know about relating to anyone. I get what you're saying, Jason, about they are really fun characters. Like they just seem like guys that you would want to hang out with. It does take a little while to get used to their lingo and in that respect, but even though they come across as not super intelligent, some of their vocabulary seems very like much more higher education. I'm like, what are some of these words? Like I wouldn't have known some of those words growing up. So I did like how they included that into their characters. Like they weren't just dumb, I don't know really what you want to call them, stoners, whatever type of character they are, but they were very smart. Like they really were. They just weren't necessarily great at school. Did anyone ever do like a history report like that? Because I thought that was really crazy that they did a performance like that. Like if I had to do that in school, I would have failed. Like I would not have been able to do a report like that at all.
I think the closest for we never had to do anything in an auditorium like that. That's for sure. And I think in the original script, it was presented in front of the classroom. But you know, it's a movie. Let's make it crazy and do it in front of a theater. But I do remember in one of my classes, we had to pick a musical act or an artist and do a presentation in front like that. And I remember picking the Rolling Stones. And one of the things that I kind of did different was I literally had music playing throughout my presentation of the Stones, because people would like talk about it, then play a song, then talk about it, play a song. But I was playing music the whole time because I love movies. So it's just like, this is the soundtrack to my presentation. And that's what I kind of did different that was unique to what everybody else was doing. But it's still so nerve-wracking. And I was thinking about that watching the movie and watching the presentation, thinking to myself, if I'm in the audience and I'm watching this is really cool. But I'm thinking, oh, where did they get these actors? This is amazing. They got all these people to come in and play these roles, not realizing they got the real people there. This is great. You're hearing it from the source. So that was amazing. I'm like, when would it ever dawn on them that, holy crap, Abraham Lincoln was actually talking in front of us, or Genghis Khan was actually doing a fighting demonstration in front of us? They probably never got that, and that just kind of a bummer in a sense.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's so great. I have a very specific story related. It's funny. I didn't even realize the influence that Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure had on me. Apparently, either consciously or unconsciously. But when I was speaking of that English class where I had gotten distracted, I had done a video presentation to mix things up a little bit. I had made a montage from the original Star Wars films to point out the usage of archetypes within the story and how George Lucas used them. Because in our English class, I believe we were talking a little bit about Joseph Campbell and maybe a little bit of Carl Jung, but Joseph Campbell, again, and speaking of mythology and the usage of archetypes. So I was just so engrossed by film, so passionate about movies and just movies in general, that I wanted to bring that in to the classroom. And so it became about visual representation instead of, just standing in front of the class and speaking. So I did that video presentation, but then later on, the theatrical presentation, now I'm blanking on what this, I had a whole story of, so it was my senior year, and it was so boring. I think it was a different English class, and we were talking about the adventures of Huck Finn, speaking of adventures. And I asked the teacher, can I do a video presentation instead of a book report? So we literally ran out, my friends and I that were in the class together, we ran out with a video camera and did Huck Finn 1991. That was the title of it. As if what would Huck Finn be like in the present day? That being 1991 at the time, and that was the whole story. And I think, of course, I had to be the titular character. I had to be Huck Finn, but I had my buddy play Tom Sawyer, and we were kind of reenacting the events of the book, but in 1991 time. So there you go. And then we did it. And that started a trend. The classes after that, Bill and I have a mutual friend, Chris, who was a year behind me, who also attended the same high school and did his video presentation kind of in the same vein. So, but do you guys, I know we'll jump around in the film a little bit in discussion, which is great. We can talk about all of it at different points, but that oral presentation, I understand, I don't have the fear of public speaking, but can you imagine being in high school in front of an entire auditorium filled with the whole school, basically doing an oral presentation for your history class? When does that ever happen? But I was like, oh my God, that would freak me out.
Yeah, absolutely. I wasn't ever really too bad at public speaking myself or anything, but even just watching that scene, it kind of gave me some public speaking anxiety myself. Even just watching it on screen, I'm like, oh my gosh, that is very intimidating. And also just having all of those people on the stage with you and having to kind of lead what they're about to do. Because, like, obviously some of them didn't speak English. That was very insane.
Yeah, because I think what makes intimidating about that project, too, is not only do they have to spout facts about historical figures, part of the project was, what would those figures think of modern-day San Dimas? Which, makes the mall scene so funny, because Bill and Ted drop off all these historical figures at the mall so they can absorb what present-day life is, and then come back and pick them up, and then have them talk about, almost they're making them do all presentations also on top of, all right, this is Socrates or Socrates, and this is what he was about, and let's talk about what he thinks about modern day San Dimas. So there's a lot of moving parts that they had to do to really get this presentation off the ground. And yeah, of course, modern day me think is like, well, how do they set all this up? Were they talking about this while they're shooting through in the phone booth?
Right.
Like, okay, you're gonna stand up here, you're gonna go first, you're gonna go second. It just happens, but it feels so organic and it works, and you just love it. And you don't think about that stuff until it's over, but when you're doing a podcast and the movies are like, yeah, how the hell did they pull that off? That's amazing. They got all the lights ready, and Billy, you're gonna introduce us, and we're gonna come out, and everything's just working great, and the crowd's just into it, and yeah, it's a great ending to how it all comes about.
So I have to ask, I know, Bill, you said you saw the sequel. Jason, did you, after loving the first one, did you go and see the second one as well?
I did, and I remember enjoying it, and I would rewatch that on VHS and cable whenever it was on. I think my true love is still with the first film, and can't remember too much from the sequel. I know I would remember more as I would rewatch it. I was actually listening to a great podcast with Alex Winter, who plays Bill S. Preston Esquire in this film, just yesterday, talking about the third film, which was just recently released, Bill and Ted Face the Music, which I still have not seen.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you have seen it. I'm embarrassed to say I have not seen it.
Really?
No.
I saw it, yeah.
I haven't seen it myself, but after watching this one, I'm probably within the next week or so going to be watching the second and the third, because I'm intrigued now. It's caught me.
Yeah, it's funny. I just recently bought like the 3-pack, and to watch it for this. And now watching the first one and enjoying it so much, I'm almost afraid now to watch the second one, because I'd like that one better, just because of William Sadler's role as the Grim Reaper. He's just hilarious. He kind of steals the movie. But now I'm like, all right, I have to watch the second one. Hopefully I still like it. And then, yeah, I'll eventually get to the third one, too. But I was like, now I at least have it at home to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed both sequels, but it is hard to, I feel, sometimes carry a movie. It's been, how many years since the first one that they did, this newer one in 2020, and it's not the same. It was very different. To me, it didn't have the same appeal that the first one did. But I mean, again, you're talking about adult Bill and Ted now, so it's a little bit harder sometimes to translate that. Didn't they say they were going to be doing like a fourth one too? Like, I thought I read somewhere that they might be talking about that. But
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Surprise me with how many John Wicks he's doing.
oh gosh,
all about the sequels. Yeah, it was funny because when I was looking at the films of 1989, so many of the big hits were sequels. And then, of course, Bill and Ted's gets its own sequel, in the early 90s. But, yeah, I mean, the first one, though, I think really, it's one of those movies that captures lightning in a bottle. It's just so specific to this specific area where you go to kids, you can see that in the research where when they were trying to distribute the film, the issue was with some of the people because the original distributors went bankrupt, and then they got, some of those people went to a different company, and then they're distributing, they're going, how are we going to sell this thing? Do kids really talk like this? Can anybody relate to this? And it's just so specific, but they did capture lightning in a bottle. And I think what works about the movie in general is that just go with it factor, the suspension of disbelief. I like the way that the beginning of the film, it right away gets you into the whole time travel aspect of it. It's like, oh, it's going to be this kind of movie. Okay, I better, settle in for this kind of movie and already have the mindset for this kind of thing. It's going to be a little over the top, but it's going to be a wild ride. And there's a charm to it. I think that's the word. I was like, there's a certain charm that the first one captures and portrays that it's hard to recapture that, But if it makes money, there's going to be a sequel.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And what did you guys think about the use of, at least in this first one, the use of the phone booth as the time travel? Number one, it was definitely nostalgic to see the phone booth again, and then with the antenna on top, the like really makeshift antenna that you haven't seen since, gosh, probably the early 80s. So that was, I enjoyed that part too. And like them getting everybody in it, and then at the one point the phone booth being like on the side while they're traveling, and everybody's like sticking up through the door because there's so many of them that they just can't all fit regularly with all the different time travel mechanisms. What'd you guys think of the phone booth for this movie?
Well, it was funny because I think their original idea was to use a car, but because of Back to the Future, they didn't want to do it. So we're like, oh, we'll do a phone booth. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a show out there that's been long running. So, you went from one thing to another. But I thought, it was interesting that they used the phone and then you would basically call time, which I thought was a neat trick that they used in order to get from one place to another. And it really does make this movie a time capsule, because I doubt my kids have ever seen a phone booth in person. I was surprised my daughter didn't even ask about it when watching the movie. I think she just rolled with it. That was just some kind of time travel device. I don't even know if she realized it was supposed to be a phone booth. But no, I thought it was a good way. It was just like, hey, if you want to go to the French Revolution, you just call it up and here's your book, and that's where you go. So I don't know how they came up with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. We talked about the oral presentation at the end of the film, which is the big climax, and it's great in its, like Bill was touching on. How did they put this presentation together, the choreography? And that's that just go with it factor where you're like, there's no way in hell they could pull this off at all, but I don't care. This is fun. I just want to look at this and enjoy it and be along for the ride. I want to be in the audience in that auditorium with the kids and cheering and laughing. And that's the thing. Again, with the device of the phone booth, how many people? I think they get 9 of them in total into that booth, including Bill and Ted, right? Because you got Socrates, Billy the Kid, Joan of Arc, Abraham Lincoln, Genghis Khan, Beethoven. Who am I missing? Did I say Joan of Arc already? Anyway, there's 9 of them. Freud, thank you. So it's like there's no way they'd all fit in that phone booth. That's got to be the biggest phone booth of all time. But no. I don't care. And that's what was smart about how they started the film off, where it's just like, oh, this is just going to be goofy. There is a really silly aspect to this movie. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous movie. And you're like, oh, perfect. I don't want to think for an hour and a half. I do not want to think. I just want to lean back and feel good. Yeah, the phone booth is a great device. Yeah, especially that they have the antenna on top, which provides an obstacle throughout the movie. When it breaks, and then they got to use gum to put it together. It's just kind of silly and stupid. And then I agree with Bill. Punching in the date or the year on the dial pad. To dial up the actual year they want to travel to. I mean, it's traveling through time circuits and. It's all great. It's all good.
When they are in England with the princesses, that whole time, I just have always been a big medieval English fan, and so seeing that and because that was with the whole put them in the Iron Maiden, and they're like, oh, the Iron Maiden. And so, what about you, Ashley?
So I have 2 that I just thought were really funny. So I like the Abe Lincoln one where he's being questioned, by whoever. He's telling him, oh, I'm Abraham Lincoln, blah, 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 born on this date. And just not believable at all for the guy that he's talking to. And I was born on the same date as Abe Lincoln. So that's why I just really enjoyed that interaction. But also the scene in the beginning where the parents come in and like this, well, like the stepmom, and they're like getting the, Bill and Ted out of the room so that they can use the room. I'm just like, what the hell? What is going on here? I just thought that was hysterical. So
Yeah, I was just going to point out too, with that particular scene, the stepmom in this is hilarious. The character of Missy, because that's one of my favorite quotes in the film, is when they're in Bill's bedroom and she comes in to give them some little like finger food or whatever it is, and you see Bill staring at his stepmom with just jaw dropped, mouth open, and Ted's like, dude, that's your mom. That's just the best, because so ridiculous. But as Bill and I like to do is we kind of go, hey, it's that actor, because we recognize someone in the film from either, maybe a character actor or lesser known actor, not a household name that's, in a lot of other 80s movies. And there she is. That's Missy. That's Amy Stock, the actress who played Kim in Summer School, which we covered on our podcast. And she's great. But I have a question for you both. Here we go. This is not really a deep question, but what famous historical figure, no longer living, would you go back in time to meet? Or if you want to even think of it in...
That is a pretty deep question, though.
Yeah, within this framework, what famous historical figure would you think you would get along with the best, that you just maybe want to have a beer with?
Ashley, do you have one in mind already? This might take me a minute to think through.
No. Oh my gosh, no.
It's okay, guys, because I was asking the same question to myself, and I was like, if I'm going to ask this question, I should come up with an answer. And it took me forever. And I was just thinking, like, for myself, because I was always fascinated with flight and space travel, I would probably go back to hang out with the Wright brothers and be there that day, like in Kitty Hawk when they had their first flight, or maybe have a sit down with Neil Armstrong and be like, hey, man, so you were on the moon. What was that like? Like, let's have a beer and talk about that.
This is going to be kind of weird, but I've always thought it would be interesting. One of my favorite 80s movies is actually Princess Bride. And I know in a sense he's probably not really considered a historical figure, but after listening to Carrie's autobiography on Audible, just how he was talking about Andre the Giant. He just seemed like such a insanely cool person to be around and just fun. They got him like a little, well, not really a little, but a four-wheeler to ride around and everything. And like Carrie had hurt his foot messing around in between scenes because Andre was just like, you want to ride it. You want to ride it. And just him also being a wrestler too. I, again, grew up watching some of his old stuff with my brothers. And so probably Andre the Giant would be who, off the top of my head, would be my pick. Great answer. Yeah.
We can circle back around to me. I'm still thinking. I honestly don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna.
It's a tough one. Yeah, that's the kind of question I should have put in some notes beforehand. Like prep you guys not to just spring it on you. I love it. Here's another just a question for you, because another segment we like to do is I'd like to have a little fun with the movie we're covering, as far as maybe poking some holes. And filing some complaints, filing some issues we might have. Did you have anything that just did not work for you in this movie? Like you're just going, you don't have to be nice just because we're on this podcast and we're grateful to be here, but there's just something that you're watching this going, this movie's dumb.
I'm going to have to say probably the scene with the brother and Napoleon at the ice cream shop and everything. That kind of, I don't know, for me, for some reason, that scene just kind of was like, what? And then kind of doing some reading, and how everybody likes to poke holes in anything that has any historical relevance. That they had Napoleon acting like he had never seen ice cream before, but it had actually been introduced 200 years before Napoleon was even born in his area and everything. And so that's where it's kind of like, okay, like I get where they're going for, like, to showing him new things and everything, but that, and then just, I guess also with the brother and the two friends just ditching him, I'm like, come on, guys, like, he doesn't know where the hell he is, and he doesn't speak English, and you guys are just gonna ditch him. That's probably like my big issue with that film is like, come on, like, I get it, they're kids, so it is what kids would do, but as an adult, I'm like, I'm disappointed in that.
For me, I think it really just the big picture of they were basically kidnapping these people. Like that, to me, in certain situations and stuff, it was like, that's not okay. Like,
we just disregard that fact.
right. Basically, that's what the movie wanted you to do. But you're like, wait a second. No, but what if something were to happen? Then they're basically just screwing up the whole timeline of history, because now these people have been put into a modernized world, and then they're going to supposedly go back to where they came from. How does that not affect things later on? I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's a couple things too when you watch a movie from back in the day and you're like, oh boy, yeah, this wouldn't fly today. This wouldn't hold up or wouldn't get by the censors. It's just not okay. There's the one obvious, there's a gay slur in the film, which I really cringed at. I was like, oh, right. I saw it coming, too. And I was like, oh, that's right. Oh, that's not good. And, a lot of us will just go, oh, it's the 80s. It's still not acceptable. But that was a sign of the times, unfortunately. And then whenever Billy the Kid pulls out his pistol and fires it in a public place, again, I was like, oh, yeah, that's not good. That's not, especially, I think he does it once, and when they get on the ice rink, maybe, but also then at the end in the mall,
yeah,
right?
And then Socrates is behind him with like a water gun or something, also, like
yes.
doing the same thing.
Like, oh no, that's right, it is in the mall, because I wrote down, oh yeah, everybody would be running and screaming in terror, and that's no bueno. And then at the very end, when he's trying to get the attention. During the oral history or the presentation at the end in the auditorium, when he fires it again and shoots out one of the overhead lights, and you're like, oh yeah, again, in an auditorium full of people, oof, not good.
But I do think with being able to watch it and understand that those are not good situations, but then also reminding ourselves this is a movie, it is thankfully not real life, that we're able to still enjoy that and not let things get too out of hand. And just, again, remember, it's a movie. It's a script that was written. I do like going back on a lot of these different movies and watching. And yes, understanding that that would not fly today by any means. But you can still enjoy the feelings you had when originally watching that and reminiscing on that.
Yeah, well said. I was also going to mention, too, everybody was young on this shoot, just to get into, I don't know how much time we want to spend on like behind the scenes and trivia and whatnot, but it was fun listening to Alex Winter on the podcast I listened to, hear some behind the scenes and just how young everybody was, because Alex Winter was around 21, 22, same with Keanu Reeves. I think he was 22.
Oh, wow.
And they didn't even know, because when you're that young, anybody that's older than you by 5 years or so, you're like, oh, that person's so old. And the director, Stephen Herrick, was only 27 when he directed this film.
Wow.
And I was looking at Stephen Herrick's filmography, and I had no idea that he had done Critters previous to this, which is a cult classic, like horror comedy.
Yeah. And
then you get, here we go, into the early 90s, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead in 91. Another cult favorite. And then I was listening to your very podcast here at 90s Noise, listening to your podcast on My Girl, and I forget which one of you had mentioned this particular film, which was impactful. In 1993, The Three Musketeers, which I happen to be a big fan of. Great cast. and a great score by Michael Kamen, and had that big song, the All for One, which you get Rod Stewart and Sting and Bryan Adams all on the same track. And as soon as you mentioned the Three Musketeers, I was singing that song out loud in my car. I'm going, yeah, Three Musketeers in 1993, directed by Stephen Herrick, who directed Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Yeah, I just wanted to make that long-winded connection.
Yeah, just a little tidbit on Three Musketeers, because that was a massively impactful movie to me. I saw it in theaters when I was 2 for my brother's birthday, and that's all I wanted for Christmas that year. And I actually got to meet Kiefer Sutherland a couple years ago at MegaCon, and I waited 4 hours in his line to meet him, and I had one of my copies of Three Musketeers with me, and that was what I wanted signed. And he was so nice and everything. And I told him a little story that I'll save for our episode when we do Three Musketeers, but it was just that movie was such a huge thing for me, and I'm a little disappointed at how few people actually know it. And the fact that you actually brought it up is just incredible. I didn't realize I was the same director. And that is just even more insane.
Oh, that's awesome. You said that was Kiefer Sutherland you said you met at the convention?
Yes.
Yeah, I met him very briefly years ago outside of a bar. I gave him a light for a cigarette. Couldn't have been nicer. Couldn't have been cooler. No. And then he went on to have a full-on conversation with another friend of mine. And this was in the middle of his 24 run. As well, he was doing that show, Jack Bauer. Yeah, I was hoping I got that. Is it All for One or All for Love? Is that the name of the track from Three Musketeers?
It's All for Love.
Okay, thank you.
Because
you're the expert.
In the movie they say All for One. This is like one of my all-time favorite movies.
Yeah, just wanted to get that right for your sake, if anything else.
Definitely a great connection knowing that now. And I'm one of those people that Ashley knows this. I'll be like finding somebody in the movie and like then connecting them to something else for reference. I'll do that with like directors too, especially because I like keeping track of directors that I like. And now that kind of makes sense. Some of the timings for the comedic timings that were in Bill and Ted kind of reminded me a little bit of a couple of the comedic timings in Three Musketeers, and having the same director, that makes a little bit more sense now. All right, you guys. Well, I think we've talked a lot about this and kind of did some other discussions too, which we're always good with. We always enjoy other topics. Circling back to what we start with, we both want to thank you both so much for joining us. This was a lot of fun to talk to both of you guys and get your guys' take on Bill and Ted from when it first came out and rewatching it now, and sitting down and discussing everything with us. This has been great. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and getting to talk to each of you.
Yeah.
Watch the second two just to see how this story all wraps up, and just when I do the pod, I usually watch the movies by myself, and this is really one of the first ones I've had one of my kids, Otter, enjoyed it too. And, you know, this was way before she was even born and didn't understand half the stuff that was going. Figures. The only one she knew was Abraham Lincoln, because she hasn't learned any of that stuff yet. So I was like, hey, you might be ahead of the game now, you know.
Hey.
So thanks for allowing me to do a little bonding time there. And I was like, all right, I got to get my kids to watch more of these movies with me before we do our episodes, just to see what they think and get their feel of it too.
Yeah, I love that. I love being able, because I was honestly kind of concerned too about the movie, like how it holds up now, and does the younger generation really understand it? Is it something that they would ever watch regardless of who's in it? So it is nice to hear that your daughter really did kind of not fully understand it, but understood it enough to where she enjoyed it. And hopefully it'll be something that as she gets a bit older, we'll go back and rewatch again to hopefully maybe understand other parts of it that she didn't quite grasp this time around. So that's really, really cool. I think that can be overlooked the first go around, because you get that first impression of them. We're like, but they're amazing friends. And I think that's the big gist of the movie, is just that excellent relationship and friendship with someone, and just living your life and having fun, really. And that's what I love about this movie.
Thank you, Bill and Jason, for joining us. And we look forward to hearing your guys' podcast, other episodes in the future. And maybe we can definitely reconnect and take a walk down memory lane on another one. Maybe the next one. Maybe we touch base on the second one.
Oh,
But
yeah.
again, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you. It's another edition of, oh shit, I forgot that. We talked about this on the episode, but unfortunately, we had some like audio video translation issues where Bill's audio video didn't come out. So we're going to discuss this again because it just didn't make sense in the original because it was just me talking to myself. So it was just, I don't know. It was weird.
Why are you talking to yourself, Ashley?
I know, right? I'm like, guys, listen to this. And everyone's just like, awkward. So basically about the Bill and Ted Halloween adventure that they did at Halloween Horror Nights. Did you say you ever went to Halloween Horror Nights?
Never went to Halloween Horror Nights. We talked about it when we were over in Orlando, but had never gotten there. But this, I think, went on before we even moved down to Florida.
Yeah. So this one that I went to was in 2015. But yeah, so when I was looking it up about it, and I think this was only for, which is weird, the California one, because obviously they do it, in California and Orlando, because the Orlando one went on until I think 2020, but the California one got basically canceled, I think in 2013 was maybe the last year they did it. And there was a lot of backlash and controversy about a lot of the racial slurs and homophobic comments and the skits and stuff that they were doing with, because their skits are all about like pop culture and they always bring in sort of things that are relevant that year and they just sort of play off of that and whatnot. And it's really cheesy. It's really ridiculous, just like the movie, but it's whatever, it's a fun time.
Mm-hmm. So this wasn't a house. This was a show that they did, right?
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like
the Beetlejuice thing.
Like the Beetlejuice, Indiana Jones, just kind of like a performance that they put on, and they have all these different like Bill and Ted, and then a bunch of other like characters that are there. And they just honestly, I don't remember what the one I watched, what that one was about at all. But yeah, it was interesting looking back at it and reading about how people were so offended by it and they were really just saying how not okay it was, which is how society is nowadays. And I get it, some of the things are a little bit okay, like why are we talking about that, or why are we making jokes about it and stuff, because I was just looking, I pulled up an article about it, and there's a scene where a Sharknado appears and Kim Jong, okay, I'm gonna butcher his name, Kim Jong-young comes to the stage to explain that the Sharknado came into existence as a result of Kristen Stewart sucking his dick too hard. So, that's the kind of stuff that they were talking about and saying. And it was crude, it was ridiculous, but it was a part of Halloween Horror Nights where if you were not wanting to go wait in lines for houses or doing that kind of stuff, you could just go and sit for a little bit and watch the show and have some laughs and just be like, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like, part of me, it gets this whole woke culture and offended at ease at everything is a little too much, I guess. Again, people are like trying to change history because of it. And our country went through a bad time with different things like the Civil War, all that jazz.
Right.
But it happened. It's not something that I think really, yes, we need to learn from it and not continue to do so, but there's differences between like entertainment purposes and that's one reason why I have trouble going to things anymore, because it's just so, can't say this, can't do that, can't smile at the wrong time, can't all this kind of thing. And that's, I think, part of the reason why going back doing our podcast here, we are looking at it with different lenses, but it's also kind of just going back to where there wasn't those issues necessarily. It wasn't everything you had to watch what you said because, I might offend one person in this room type deal. And I don't know. I think for entertainment purposes, it's entertainment. Like, you have to understand that it's not going to please everybody. And so that's my 2 cents on that.
No. Yeah. Okay, I was wrong. There was a lot of backlash over the 2013 season, but then they eventually canceled its 26-year run.
26 years.
Following the 2017 season.
I don't know.
Yeah. And then they were like, people are just, it can't say stuff anymore. I just kind of, I don't know what they replaced it with, but it does suck though, because they forgot what year the one they just made came out. I think it was like 2020.
Yeah, I think so.
So it would have been interesting them having another play on it because of that movie coming out, but they canceled it before that even got to have that sucks. It really does, because
damn society.
But then also going back to Jason and his question that I never circled back around to me to get to, because didn't he ask about what was his question that he had asked again? Like, who would you want to have, like, go have a beer with or something?
Oh, okay.
Like, what historical figure you would want to have, I think. Yeah, I think it was something along that lines. And now I'm thinking about the question, and I was gonna come up with a response to it.
Oh, that's right, because
I couldn't think on the spot. I'm like, that's really intense.
I don't know at this moment. And then
we went off with another tangent.
And then I think another tangent. Those fun tangents. Yeah, I don't even remember.
I think you said Andre the Giant.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because it was like who would we want to have a beer with or something? It's like, yeah, definitely him.
Well, I don't know if it's really like he would be considered like a historical figure. He is in my eyes, but I was gonna say, after thinking about it a little bit, I was gonna say Robin Williams. Like, who wouldn't want to sit down and have a dinner and a beer and all that kind of fun stuff and just chat about life with Robin? Like, that would be amazing. So that would be my response. I'm not really big into historical figures in a sense where going back to the 19th century or whatever, where, like a lot of the characters that were in Bill and Ted, like Joan of Arc and all that kind of stuff. None of those really, I've never really been, I love history, but I've never really been big on that aspect of it where any one character was like, oh, I love them. Like, I can't even remember doing like school projects to where I think I always hated that, having to do school projects and finding a historical person where you had to, do a report on or whatever, and then go research them. And the only person that I remember doing a project like that on was Abraham Lincoln. Like, I kind of had to, like, being born on the same date as him and everything, he was the one that I would always gravitate towards. And like, if I had to do any sort of history project, I would always try to pick him.
Yeah. I had done Ferdinand Magellan. Because it was we had to pick, and no 2 people could do the same person.
Yeah.
And so it was, I mean, of course, everybody wanted like George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, all those people. And so it's like, okay, who the fuck can I? Because I think we did it by like last names or something. How we got to pick. And my last name was Smith at the time. So I was towards the end. So I had to just come up with somebody. But it was actually really interesting because, like, since I had picked Ferdinand Magellan, then when a couple of years ago or whatever, the Uncharted movie came out based on the game. And it was talking about Magellan's gold and stuff and everything. I was like, I
full
know
circle.
that story. Like,
thanks, history class.
I was like, I remember that shit.
That's
like,
hilarious.
That was drilled into
I
me.
love that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, because we don't really do them when we do collabs, but I did want to ask a this or that question. So
Okay.
Back to the Future or Bill and Ted?
Ooh.
And talking more so about the like transportation device, like what they use to like time travel in a sense.
Okay. Okay. So if we're going on that, I would probably go with DeLorean
Okay.
from Back to the Future.
That would be way more
just because it was a little
badass,
a little
comfortable.
bit more comfortable too. Not trying to fit a million people in a telephone booth. But yeah, I would have to go with Back to the Future with the transportation device.
It's funny because we're watching the new season of The Mandalorian, and Doc is actually in an episode, and we were like, he looks familiar. He sounds familiar. Oh shit.
Christopher Lloyd?
Like, it's Doc. Like, he's in there. It's so funny.
Okay.
It's hilarious.
Okay. You're gonna Alex will like that because I'll make me to where I want to watch that episode. Just that episode.
Well, yeah, because
I'm kind of
also Jack Black is in it and Lizzo. It's kind of like a big cast and just in that episode, so it's kind of cool. It's kind of funny to see them all because you're like, wait a second, Jack Black. Like, it's funny. I know you're like, wait, where is the plot going with this?
Why? Okay. Well, that'll be interesting. We'll have to probably watch that later today or something because he's been craving like watching the last, like, I think he's 2 episodes behind or something, and so I can't.
I'm not a big
I'm so
fan of it.
I'm so for Star Wars in a sense. Like I'm good with like the Attack of the Clones and was it the Revenge of the Sith or something? The 2 with Hayden Christensen.
Exactly. Yeah.
Those I'm good.
Those are bearable. Yeah, I can watch them.
Yeah, but it's just getting a little like I'm too confused. There's just too much going on.
So much going on. It's so confusing. I have no clue. I'm just kind of every so often I'll just like tune in a little bit. But then I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. Well, that's all I got.